crossing over to the other side and coming back as if you're having a near-death experience, going to the other side of the veil, and then returning back to your body. What does this mean? Why is it a near-death experience? Is near death the same as death? What have we learned about death? What is happening to all of these new legendary beings who have died and come back to life? Is this the same as ascension? Is this what ascension is? Are we learning how to ascend? Why are there so many people having near-death experiences? And why is it becoming such a phenomenon on Earth? I was going to tell the story of my 3 near-death experiences and the near-death experience of my husband, and then I learned that there is no such thing as a near-death experience. It's actually a death experience. What we experience when we go down this magical tunnel, this tunnel of white light magic, and we're coming nearer and nearer this brilliant light at the end of the tunnel, and the light just becomes brighter and brighter, and it's this joyful experience, and you walk into this light and you feel these magical tones of vibration, and there's this ringing in your head, and this ringing turns into this magical orchestra, and you hear all of the voices of angels singing in harmony. And it's not like any of the harmonies or symphonies that we hear on earth. It's just this magical blending of all of the frequencies of consciousness of everything and everyone that God has ever created. And we just feel like we're standing in this magical reality of oneness and an attunement, and that there's absolutely nothing out of tune and out of balance, and it's just this absolute perfection. And that's what it feels like when we walk into the white light after we go down the tunnel. And that is called death. That is what happens when we die. So people that go through these near-death experiences go down this tunnel to the other side, and they see beings on the other side who have already experienced this and transitioned into their spiritual self. This happens because before we come to this earth, we are this spiritual being on the other side. Our spiritual parallel self stays on the other side in their complete self, and then a little piece of them journeys down to this earth for this experience. So when we die, we return back into oneness with that spiritual self that stayed behind on the other side. What is being called a near-death experience is the exact same thing. We go through our secondary consciousness, which is this portal of oneness into our higher self, oneness into the parallel spiritual universe, and it takes us into those frequencies, that consciousness of an entirely different reality than the consciousness that we experience on this dimension. We see reality from a much higher dimension. We see reality from the allness, the highest frequency in the spectrum of light and sound of all that God has created. And when we see and experience reality from that spectrum of light, and we see all of the entities on that side of the veil being this full spiritual light self of all it is, and we see that we're all the same, and we see that we all have one mind, one divine consciousness. We're all in this cosmic ocean of love, swimming together and breathing and flying through rainbows and riding on unicorns, and all of this magic that exists on the other side when we walk down this portal into this light is exactly what happens when we die. So when a person has a near-death experience, they are actually experiencing dying. And the reason that so many people are going through this experience now is to bring this reality and this understanding to earth so that we can understand that dying is not really leaving or changing or a person being gone or it's over or it's the end. It doesn't mean that. The moment a person hears that stringing of the music of the spheres streaming in their right ear, it means that they've been connected to the secondary consciousness and they've gone through the streaming light to the highest frequency and they're shifting over into a different reality. It all comes from the divine formula of consciousness plus energy equals reality. We have our consciousness with a low frequency energy here, and when we hear that streaming or strumming of these strings within our head that seems like it almost hurts because the frequency is so different, so strong, such a high vibration within our ear that it seems like it's painful. But the only reason that it's painful is because we've been disconnected from the secondary consciousness. And that is what we're learning to do at this time. We're learning how to plug our brain into the violet string, the violet brain that connects to that frequency, that highest frequency. We move into our frequency-specific brain where that strumming within our head is not painful, but it plugs in and it becomes this magical, harmonious symphony of love streaming through our head. And then it shifts our frequencies of consciousness, and we turn in a flash of light into a new being, a new reality. Because, as the formula said, consciousness plus energy equals reality. So when we put higher frequencies of energy with the consciousness, there is a complete different reality than there is with the consciousness with the lower frequencies equaling a different reality. So this is what death is. It's simply raising the frequencies to the highest frequency of energy, putting it into our consciousness, and it creates a new reality. We're going through this ascension process now on Earth of bringing higher and higher frequencies into our consciousness to create a new reality. So we are going through an ascension process. And some people have gone through this process of ascension, going to the other side of the veil, shifting into the spiritual parallel reality, and then coming back again so that they can tell the rest of the world what it looks like on the other side of the veil. And this grand opportunity that is being given to us right now is those who go to the other side of the veil can bring back that memory, can bring back the divine love of all who are on the other side. And who's on the other side of the veil? All 7 billion plus people who are living on Earth, who we see at this lower frequency of energy and consciousness living within this reality. Those same entities exist on the other side of the veil in the spiritual reality where the frequencies of consciousness are spinning at the highest frequency of light and sound to create the highest consciousness and the most highest form of divine love and perfect unity of consciousness. All of those people exist at that higher level. And that is the true self of each one of these people. That is the self that is originally created, and then a piece of them comes down here to experience reality with a lower frequency in their consciousness. And that is what happens when we die. We get to see who we were in reality before we shifted down to a lower frequency. And we get to see everyone else as that frequency of consciousness. I am going to tell you 3 stories. I'm going to tell you the stories of when I died and went to the other side and what I saw. And I can quickly tell you that this happened to me when I died when I was living in South Korea, and I had poison put in my drink by when I was working at a 5-star hotel in South Korea, and learned that the the hotel was actually being run by some very some people who we would call the Illuminati, but I learned this group was actually much darker and deeper than the Illuminati. They are connected with the North Koreans and some very dark forces who did not want any American management coming into their spectrum of reality in Korea. And I was a part of a hostile takeover of a hotel. So this whole incident that happened to me in Korea has been told before in my book, The Matrix of Illusions, and in the Love Poison book. So these stories have been told before. And the story that I'm going to tell in much greater detail about my husband having a death experience, not a near-death experience, because there's nothing near about it. He was very dead. He was very gone. And his experience of death and dying was extremely different than any other story told about near-death experience, because he actually ascended into the light and disappeared before he died. He did everything in a different order than most people that have near-death experiences. So I want to tell about that experience of a near-death experience, but I want to tell my audience that the reason that my husband and I both went through these near-death experiences was to go through a process of understanding. When I experienced watching my husband die, I was able to pull on my own experience of dying that had happened a few decades earlier. So I knew the whole process. I knew what he was going through because I had gone through it myself. I knew what he would be going through when he came back to his body. I knew what all this meant. I knew what the ringing in the ears meant because I had been trained by a group of Elohim angels to hear this frequency of transformation in my ear, connecting me to the Elohim of hearing, connecting me through all these higher and higher frequencies to the other side of the veil, so that I had learned how to take these journeys to the other side of the veil into other spiritual realities through formulas given to me by groups of ascension teams who have been preparing those of us on earth for this experience. I was able to see through clairvoyance everything that my husband went through. So that's what makes it a very interesting story, is because I was watching this experience of my husband's near-death experience through my eyes wide open, which is a little different than people who die and then tell their experience of what happened to them while they were kind of in a coma or in a dream state, and what they remembered when they came back. But what is the most important of all of these near-death experiences is it's helping to bring the consciousness of those on earth closer together, because we have to become at one with our spiritual self on the other side of the spiritual veil, on the other side of the atomic mirror, on the other side of the infrared. That means we are in the visible light spectrum, or the matter the visible forms, and the spiritual reality is the antimatter, the invisible, the spiritual. So the only difference between these two perspectives of reality is one we can see and one we cannot see. However, many of us have been learning how to see that which has been invisible before. So we are bringing this invisible light spectrum into our perception in this reality so that we can understand how we become one with our spiritual self. And all of these near-death experiences are giving us more and more insight on what it is like to become at one with our spiritual self. There have been many stories told by those who have had near-death experiences, who went down the white tunnel and into this bright light, and then they met with this beautiful being in this white light garment, and they were so bright and that they couldn't look at them, and most people believe this being that they met was Jesus Christ. But what they don't realize is it wasn't Jesus Christ, it was the Christ of them. It was their Christ form. It was their light body. It was them looking into a mirror at their spiritual self. And when they look into that mirror on the other side of the veil, they see this beautiful light body. And we can learn to do that without dying. We have been taught by this process that so many have gone through in this near-death experience, how to learn to walk through the magic mirror of transformation, how to walk down that hall of light into the photons and phonons of pre-light and pre-sound, how to walk into the plasma sphere of light of the sun, and how to walk into the other side to see our transformation take place into this Christ body. So we already have these formulas of how to do this, how to walk down the tunnel, go through the diamond door of the mind of God and see our Christ self on the other side. And then when this happens, we turn into a blue body. We turn into the blue hue of reality, and we turn around and we come back to our body. And the reason that people's consciousness change after they go through this near-death experience is because when they come back as this blue body, this transition body. It's an invisible color on this side of the spectrum, except for those people who have developed their spiritual eyesight to see the blue hue. And those of us who can see that can see those people glowing as a blue hue because they are wearing their blue body. This is what I could see when my husband transformed and came back. He looked like a blue light bulb. He was blue, glowing with blue. And what happened to my husband and I is we were being shown how to create an ascension portal when we were living in Monterey, and we were being told how to go into this transition of light and sound and walking through the portal, how to create an ascension portal between earth and heaven, going clear out beyond the cosmos into the pre-light and pre-sound of the creation substance, and how we could actually turn our body into light and flash out of this body and into our spiritual body to transform on the other side of the veil, which is called Orbing, which is what ascended masters have been doing for eons. They can transform their body into light, ascend to the other side, and then you would see them standing on a cloud because their rate of particle spin of their body had changed to a higher frequency, which made them more etheric, and then the body structure would reform to look like a body of a higher dimensional soul self standing above looking down. Our higher self, our spiritual self, is always standing above us, watching down, watching over us, at about 36 inches above our head. And that spiritual self always looks like a sphere of blue light. And those of us who have practiced the techniques of connecting with our higher self, with our blue sphere body, with light and sound technology techniques, have experienced this before. And the techniques teach us how to keep bringing more and more frequencies, higher and higher frequencies into our bodies, which makes the cellular structure of the body change, makes the DNA transform into a higher frequency, makes the whole sphere around the body transform the body into the light and sound of the higher frequencies around the body, and then the body folds into this sphere of light and disappears. This is what I saw take place before my eyes when my husband turned into light and disappeared.